Welcome to the pre-briefing webinar for attendees of the upcoming NAESP National Leaders Conference. We are very excited to provide you with the opportunity to help prepare you for the Capitol Hill visit portion of the conference, especially for those of you who may be new to the conference. We also would like to welcome seasoned National Leaders Conference attendees who simply would like a refresher about conducting meetings on Capitol Hill and the 2012 NAESP Advocacy Campaign. With me today, I have two of our advocacy specialists. Kelly Pollitt is our Associate Executive Director of Advocacy, Policy, and Special Projects, and with her is Emily Wallace, Legislative and Advocacy Coordinator. They're going to help you today understand a little bit more about the Advocacy in Action briefing, preparing you for the National Leaders Conference. With that, I'd like to turn the screen over to Kelly Pollitt.
Thank you, Honor, and welcome everyone. Emily and I are very glad to have you with us today and spend the next hour or so talking with you as you prepare to come to Washington for the National Leaders Conference. Traditionally, NLC is designed to provide state affiliate leaders with an opportunity to increase their state association's capacity, explore and discover best leadership practices, and recognize states that are making marked advances in the field. Today, we're excited that we are able to share more about the advocacy portion of the conference, and so that you can learn about how the local impact of what your efforts are having in Congress and before the administration. As Congress presses forward with the reauthorization of ESEA, and yes, we're back at it again this year, but the exchange of information and best practices from the field and tools and resources that you need to be successful are critical to share with members of Congress. It's necessary for us to share the significant contributions that you've made to the field and contribute to the discussion on reauthorization. Several NAESP members have been in Washington over the past 2 years, participating in hearings held by the House and Senate Education Committees. The principal's voice has been strongly represented in the debate, but your voice matters even more here in Washington and up on the Hill. So we're looking forward to having you here. To help you navigate on Capitol Hill and prepare you to conduct meetings with the members of Congress and their staff, we'd like to review a few background and logistical areas. So scheduling your Capitol Hill visit, many of you are in the process right now of setting up meetings and should have received information from Emily about how to schedule your meeting. And if you haven't, please contact us. We'll be giving you all of our contact information so that you can call us at any time if you've been having a problem. And a couple of notes about scheduling meetings on the Hill. It's very common for offices to wait until what many of you would consider the last minute before confirming meetings. Please don't get frustrated. This is normal. Members of Congress and their staff are very busy. They just came back from the 4th of July recess, so they're sort of holding out on their scheduling to see what the committee and hearing schedules look like. So please keep at it. And if you need help from us confirming a meeting with an office, let us know. We're happy to reach out to staff. Also, as you schedule your meetings and are coordinating with others from your state, we are again doing the National Leaders Conference in conjunction with AASA and superintendents. We encourage you to coordinate with your superintendents. And if you need assistance with contacting those from your state, let us know. We're happy to connect you. Again, this year, regarding scheduling, how we're trying to move forward in a better way with capturing the meetings and schedules that you will be conducting on the Hill so that we can provide the appropriate resources and materials. I'm going to ask Emily now to walk you through the NLC site on naesp.org and also the form that we're asking you to complete this year. So, Emily?
So here we are at the advocacy web page, and if Honor could just go to, if you see on the left-hand side of your screen on the bottom, there's advocacy events tab or link. And when you click there, you can actually continue to click onto the NLC link. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, there is a information about the event, including a schedule an agenda, which hopefully you guys have looked at. And also, most importantly for us right now, is the appointment form that we provided for you guys to fill out once you've scheduled and confirmed your Hill appointments. Like Kelly said, this will just help us provide the necessary extra information that anyone might need with particular offices you're meeting with. So if you click on the schedule link, you're taken to a page that is pretty self-explanatory. You fill out the time and the contact information for the staff person you're meeting with, and then and what senator or member of the House that you're meeting with. And this goes from 10 a.m. until I believe 4 in the afternoon. So if you have, if you have a meeting, say at 9:30, I've got that question a couple of times. Just fill it in where you see appropriate, and maybe just put in parentheses the exact time of your schedule. Just, make the form work for however you need it to for your day.
And also, if all else fails, there's always good old email, and we'll be sure at the end of the presentation to provide our email addresses. If you feel more comfortable just submitting a few emails to Emily and I, that's great too. So moving through, we wanted to talk with you today a little bit about the atmosphere on Capitol Hill, and also to prepare you for discussion on Capitol Hill. Last week we provided a set of materials and talking points to help set the stage for your discussion. In the email, and if you have not received the email, please get in touch with us. We'll be sure to forward it along. In the materials, the goal is to help you make the case for how the discussion on Capitol Hill with regard to education policy and the reauthorization of ESEA can better build the capacity of principals and why. The talking points that were provided are for you to go through and help frame your discussion. They're not meant to be iterative. Rather, if you're comfortable picking out 1 or 2 points that best help you present in a meeting, please do so. Again, these are reference materials, background information that we hope you'll take the time to review prior to coming to DC. In addition to the talking points in the reference guide, we also encourage you to go to NAESP's advocacy website, and Honor's going to click on that right now for you just to take you to our page. We have an advocacy blog and materials available for you to peruse. Our advocacy page has a lot of information, so if you've reviewed the materials and you have additional questions about issues that we've raised, please go onto our advocacy site and take a look. There's a lot of information linked to the materials that we've already provided to you that describe the issues in more detail, so we encourage you to go there. So just to get back to the atmosphere in Washington right now, as everyone knows, we're in the middle of an election year climate, and that is to say that any issue that doesn't intend to be political usually ends up being so, whether it's intended to or not. So that continues to put ESEA into a political fray situation and really has become victim of K-12 politics. The reauthorization of ESEA began a little over a year ago in the House with the committee, who decided to take up a piecemeal approach by offering a series of bills to reauthorize the law. On the other hand, the Senate took up reauthorization from a comprehensive approach. What ended up happening by the beginning of this year, we ended up with 2 bills, one in the Senate committee and one in the House. The piecemeal bills were eventually consolidated into one bill. And where we are today as a result of politics is basically a stalemate. We have 2 bills, one from either chamber, that members of Congress are essentially unable or willing to compromise. And again, this leaves ESEA and educators in a lurch. The other big issue dominating the scene in Capitol Hill today is about sequestration and appropriations. And sequestration is basically a term for across-the-board budget cuts. It's a particularly devastating issue right now, considering the state budget shortfalls and the economic woes that everyone is facing. So we're going to describe all of these issues in greater detail as we go forward. We provided a set of talking points for you to use to help make your case on why ESEA, first and foremost, needs to be reauthorized. And once Congress gets serious about a discussion to reauthorize, ESEA needs to do a better job of building the capacity of principals. And really, with the committee bills that have been passed out of both chambers, we believe they're a good starting point to talk about the federal role in education. There are many provisions in each bill that principals support, and we can detail those provisions in the briefing. You're welcome to go and highlight a couple of letters that are on our website, and they're letters that we've gotten, as we say in policy, a little bit weedy on, but it addresses issues such as removal of the school improvement models of reform that automatically and arbitrarily fire principals, the elimination of the NCLB era of AYP and punitive sanctions on schools, and also about teacher and principal evaluation provisions. So we address all of those, but from a big picture perspective, principals support many of the provisions, and two of the must-haves in either bill is removing the punitive accountability system of No Child Left Behind, and that states and districts must really do a better job of building the capacity of principals by providing greater access to high-quality professional development. So as a talking point, we've highlighted that for you. The reason that we're also urging you to talk to members of Congress about not giving up on their work on ESEA is because we've had a tremendous amount of reforms that have been pushed by the federal government, where states have taken up the administration's waivers and required No Child Left Behind from the accountability provisions of No Child Left Behind. This chart represents every state listed alphabetically. The chart overlays each of a set of federal education reforms ranging from Race to the Top, Common Core adoption, which is spurred in most part by Race to the Top, the ESEA waiver packages offered by the administration, the latest round of waivers that the administration has offered where states have been able to freeze their annual measurable objectives for their AYP proficiency targets, and then finally the states that have applied for waivers but not yet been approved. As you can see, there's a collision of reforms that are going on in each state, and we've highlighted all of the green states we consider to be impacted. There are two notable states, Nebraska and Texas, who really have kept to themselves, and the yellow that have minimal impact, or excuse me, orange, that have minimal impact. So really we just wanted to provide a visual for you. We're going to be upping our technology ante here and providing a state map for you for better representation. But just for now, for preparatory purposes, we wanted to give you this visual to help emphasize and underscore the point we're trying to make here about the need for Congress to really take what's going on in the state into account as ESEA work goes forward. The next point we want to emphasize in our efforts to underscore that Congress needs to do a better job of building the capacity of principals is the paltry amount of dollars, federal dollars, a $2.5 billion pot of funds that's directed to professional development for teachers and principals. We know that only 3% are spent on principals, and we think this is just unacceptable. Going forward, there are a lot of ways that Congress can correct this issue and provide, encourage states to provide greater access to high-quality professional development. And as you're talking on the Hill, those many ways we've summed up for you in our advocacy brochure. During the meeting, we'll be giving you, well, prior to your meetings, we'll be giving you materials that you can leave behind on the Hill. You will have a folder to hand to your staff person or the member of Congress you'll be meeting with. Inside that folder will be several pieces of material that speak to these issues we're talking about, and notably, Honor, if you could go ahead and click on that last link, is to our, there will be a copy of the advocacy brochure that we're currently using. And an easy way to talk to legislators is to say, the law should do this, and here's how you do this, and hand them a document. So that's what we've done for you in this advocacy brochure. We have really summarized the different ways in which educators can look at ESCA in a different way, but most specifically with a lens towards school leadership and how to build out the role and underscore the work that principals do. So I'm going to pause on the ESCA-related issues and move back to Emily, who's going to share with you a little bit more about the budget in the sequestration climate on Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. I'm going to first start to talk about the budget process this year. The annual appropriations process is, as we like to say, well underway, but a little complicated this year, as I guess you could consider any year, but particularly this year. So we always advocate at NAESP that we need more funding for Title I and IDEA for the low-income and special needs students. And I'm happy to report that the Senate, which passed a bill out of the Appropriations Committee, included a $100 million increase for both Title I and IDEA, which hasn't happened in a while, so that was pretty great to see. It's expected that an increase of that size, if not even larger, will come from the House bill. Last year there was substantial increases included in the House version of the Education Appropriations Bill, and you expect to see that again soon. The principals, we also advocate that we oppose consolidating and eliminating federal education programs, which wasn't what we saw in the Senate bill, but it's expected to see in the House bill.
And sorry, Emma, I'm just going to make a quick point about that, why we raised that concern in the budget process. And as we're seeing these budget issues plague Congress and they're looking for cutting, one of the ways in which they maneuver through that is by consolidating categorical or line item programs. And what that does in effect is eliminate a program. So the trend has been over the past 2 years when you're looking to have a program eliminated, since every program, including the school leadership program, has a constituency, it's much easier to claim that the programs are being consolidated. But what we're finding at the end of the day is that they're actually being eliminated. So we're opposing this trend because it's eliminating many programs that benefit educators and disadvantaged students. So we're trying to fight to keep a lot of those services and programs alive.
In addition, the House has allocated or made available $8 billion less for the education, the Labor, Health, Human Services, Education Appropriations Bill, $8 billion less than what the Senate allocated, which is another reason why we expect to see consolidated and eliminated programs in the House bill. As I mentioned at the bottom, the Senate committee recently, just last month, passed out of the Appropriations Committee the Education Funding Bill. The House has not yet moved their education funding bill, but it's expected that they're going to do that sometime this month. And it may actually be announced that it could happen next week when you guys are in town. So we'll keep you posted on that as you hear more information in the next couple of days.
But what the likelihood will be on that, even though we're seeing the committees working and marking up these budget bills, it's more likely than not we're going to see another continuing resolution this year, which means that the programs in existence right now and operating will end up being level funded through the remainder of the fiscal year. So look for that. We're going to continue to provide updates for you next week, as well as updating our advocacy page on how that turns out. But again, expect another continuing resolution this year, even though we have the committees working. They're doing their diligence. But it remains to be seen. $8 billion is a lot of money to try to reconcile.
So this next slide talks about a couple of issues that are of great concern to us. The first one is that NAESP has long opposed any federal funding for school vouchers. And the House recently included a $15 million increase for the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which is here in DC, and it really sets a poor precedent for providing funding for any future voucher program, which we strongly oppose. It's unclear if this increase would ever see the light of day in the Senate, so it's not yet passed into law, but it is out there, and it's something that we are definitely fighting right now. The second issue that has come up this year is the definition of highly qualified teacher. We have successfully advocated against extending the current HQT definition, which right now states that to be highly qualified, you can be in a teacher certification program, not yet graduated, and be considered highly qualified. And we really feel that this is definitely something that needs to happen in reauthorization of ESEA with robust debate, and definitely is not something that should happen during the budget process. So we, like I said, this is not included in the Senate bill, but it is something that we expect to reemerge later in the budget process. This issue has not gone away, so we'll talk more about that when you're in town.
And I'll just add this. Why is Emily bringing up what is seemingly an authorization issue related to highly qualified teacher in a budget bill? Well, right now, as you know, we have a stalemate on ESEA. So rightfully, any attempt by Congress to address highly qualified should be an ESEA reauthorization. In light of that not likely occurring this year, which we assume went without saying so far, but if you were wondering, it's not going to happen this year. The way that many other interest groups in Washington have dealt with this issue is to pursue it through the appropriations process. At NAESP, we believe in transparency and separating authorization from appropriations issues because we believe it convolutes the quality integrity of education. And that is another reason why we're opposing the appropriations measure to consider that pre-service teachers who are enrolled in alternative certification programs that haven't even finished the program would be considered highly qualified. There was a recent court decision about the issue as well. If you'd like to read more information, the issue has been covered by the Washington Post. We're happy to forward that to you. But we'll be talking more about this next week as we hear any developments, but it's an ongoing issue right now as we speak. It's a very important issue to address for the field and the profession, so we wanted to bring it to the forefront.
This current slide, now we're going to start talking about sequestration, which Kelly briefly described to you. So hopefully many of you have at least heard the term or starting to hear the term. And what it is exactly is that it's across the board kind of looming cuts that are set to take place coming this January. So it all came about with last summer's Budget Control Act. And what that did, as some of you may remember, was provide an increase in the debt ceiling. In addition, it also created what was called the Super Committee. As most of you should know, the Super Committee met last year several times, but failed to agree ultimately on a deficit deal that would cut over $1 trillion to the federal budget. So because of this, $1 trillion then has to be cut automatically over the next 10 years. So what happens the first year is that across-the-board cuts will apply, and it's going to be some percentage of not targeted cuts. We're talking half of these will go to defense programs, and half will go to what's called non-defense programs, which includes basically the entire Department of Education budget. These cuts were originally meant to be kind of the worst-case scenario that would have forced the Super Committee to act on some compromise. Obviously, that didn't happen. So there is some consensus to reduce the impact of these cuts, but right now, more efforts needed to protect all programs, not just certain programs. This next fiscal year, like I said, we're going to have across-the-board percentage cuts, but the next, up till 2021, we're going to have lowered caps, with basically the amount of money made available in the appropriations process will be dramatically lowered for the next several years, which will ultimately lead to deeper cuts to all education programs. So next I'm going to talk about what programs are exempt and how this will impact education. So there are several programs that are exempt from sequestration, including Social Security and Pell Grants. Pell Grants are only exempt from the first year, kind of across-the-board percentage cuts, and it actually is the only education program exempt from any of this sequester. In addition, I mentioned that the CHIP program, the Children's Health Insurance Program, as well as food stamps, SSI are exempt. This is not a complete list, but it just gives you an idea of the type of programs that are exempt. Obviously, education is going to be hard hit. What we know is it's going to be hard hit, but we don't know exact dollar figures yet. There's a lot of things out there that are unknown at this point, and there's a lot of things that are going to be dependent on congressional action. We recently supported an effort in the Senate to demand that a report is put out that would outline the implementation and impact of these cuts and actually get down to how many education jobs would be lost and the reduction of education services to kids that would be made as a result. This information just isn't known yet, and so we're really trying to push hard to find out more information so that we can put this out there to Congress and the public so that we can work to reduce the impact. What is known is that, or what's estimated right now rather, is that these cuts could be anywhere from the range of approximately 7 to 9%. So that would be across the board. Like I said, it's not targeted to certain programs. It would impact equally all programs open to the sequester. And what 9% could mean to the Department of Education is over $4 billion cut in federal funding. $1 billion cut to Title I and IDEA, and $225 million to Title II, which is that pot of money that goes to professional development for teachers and principals. And these across-the-board cuts aren't really determined of how much is appropriated, so we're not finished with the appropriations process for the next fiscal year. But no matter what level of funding each program or line item gets, they're still going to be open to seeing percentage cuts. And the unfortunate thing about all of this is that these cuts are going to happen starting January 2nd, which means that a lot of school budgets could be impacted right in the middle of the next school year. Some states are gearing up right now and trying to prepare folks for these looming cuts and not knowing quite what's going to happen timing-wise. Texas, for instance, has informed that their school districts that they plan to withhold 10% of all federal funding that they receive just to avoid mid-year cuts, because it's just unclear exactly how this is going to play out in Congress. And if anything, this will happen. This debate will happen only after the election. Obviously, that's just weeks before these cuts are scheduled to occur. So this doesn't give educators a lot of time to plan budgets. So another example besides Texas would be Vermont, who has also informed their districts that they should prepare for a 10% reduction in federal funds. To reduce the impact of sequestration, Congress must pass separate legislation. They can't just pass the funding bill for this next fiscal year. And they really need to hear from constituents on just how these devastating across-the-board cuts will impact their communities. If you think a 10% cut could lead to, having to eliminate a teacher position, you need to tell your members of Congress that. They need to hear that from you guys. And like I said, expect the debate on this issue to really pick up in November, after the November elections, like I said, just weeks before these are set to occur. So right now there's a lot more effort to protect just defense programs. I said earlier that half of the cuts that need to be made this year will be targeted to defense, and half of them will be targeted to non-defense programs. And unfortunately for us, there is a tremendous push to protect basically only the defense programs. And the only way to do that would be to increase the impact on everything else, including education. We can't reduce the overall amount that needs to be cut, so if you protect one program over another, someone's going to be hit harder. Like I said, there's bipartisan interest to reduce these cuts on both sides of the aisle in both the House and Senate, as well as the President has said, he doesn't want to see this happen. However, how we get to actually, what programs we protect and we actually get to that debate in Congress is very unclear. So right now, we're really advocating for a balanced deficit reduction approach to reduce the impact of sequestration. One industry, like I said, shouldn't be protected over another one. It is unreasonable to think that the education budget can be totally spared, but we really think that both cuts and revenues must be debated to make targeted cuts. I think what's most devastating is that this is going to be across the board, and at this point, no programs can be spared in the education department. Obviously, cuts of this magnitude are really going to harm our economy. It's interesting to note that only 3% of the federal budget is the Department of Education, which obviously isn't very much. And June job numbers just came out recently last week, and that showed that 14,000 local government education jobs were lost in the past month. And just over the past year, just over 100,000 local education jobs were lost. So obviously we need to work hard to try to reduce the impact to education funding, and we're trying to do that.
So before we get into questions, I just want to finish by saying, as you can see, we've been very busy here in Washington, and that's a lot of information to take in. As we work to help prepare you for the conference coming up, in light of where we are in the congressional agenda and how we, in light of the election, and what issues would be considered, we felt it was a good idea to help you make the case on ESEA and building capacity as well as the budget issues. But just to note, we are not ending there. We have a full advocacy apparatus through our VOCUS alerts and systems. We have a new network that we're going to be launching. As Emily said, Congress is likely to return after the election during a lame duck session to consider the sequester and budget issues, and at that time we'll be ramping up our campaign. But we really need you to alert your members of Congress and their staff now about these devastating cuts to education. So we'll be talking more throughout the year, and for purposes of NLC, we really need you to focus and prepare by reviewing the background materials, and these issues are confusing and they can be rather convoluted at times. So we're here to help explain ourselves. If there is something that's not clear, please let us know. We'll do our best to help make it as clear as possible. We're here to support you. So we're going to take a look at a couple of questions.
Okay. The first question is, do most state waivers override the negative sections of NCLB, like impacts on AYP, etc.?
Well, yes, it depends first and foremost on the state application and what they've applied to receive a waiver for. In most cases, the waivers apply to the accountability provisions of NCLB. So in the case where a state applied to be waived from AYP and put in place their own accountability system and the waiver was granted by the department, yes, the waiver will trump NCLB AYP requirements, but that is temporary. That is only until A, Congress reauthorizes ESEA, or for the next 2 years.
Another question, are we expecting an overall decrease, or is that an offset by an increase in Title I and IDEA?
So, Emily, do you want to take that?
Oh, well, I would just say that, it's great that Senate included a $100 million increase in both Title I and IDEA, and we do expect the House bill to include a similar, if not larger, increase to those programs. However, the caveat that Kelly mentioned is that we're kind of in a stalemate because ultimately the dollar amount in both of the House and Senate bills are so far apart, really this unprecedented difference, that we expect to have what's called a continuing resolution, or a CR, that will ultimately extend the current funding levels. But keep in mind, all of that is open to the sequester. So whatever happens there will then reduce the funding level starting in January.
In the meantime, as we continue to go over just a couple of logistics to help you get ready for your meetings, continue to chat in questions. If there's anything that you have outstanding that we don't get to or you're waiting for, shoot us a question and we'll get to it, since I think we might have a couple extra minutes. So again, as you get ready for your meetings, think about and review the material, but also what we hope you'll do is to take your own experience in your own situation and provide the members of Congress and their staff with background about what you're facing, the issues that are going on in your communities and in your schools. What members and staff like to know, though, is the student populations that you serve. For example, what's the percentage of Title I students in your school? If you don't serve a large Title I population, what are the issues that you are working on with your teachers? What are the challenges with your student demographics? Those kinds of issues help set the context and help put perspective in place for members as you're talking about these issues and why it's so important to build the capacity of principals as the catalyst for school improvement. Then, do you talk about your success? You know, we have this barrage against public education these days, and we really want you to talk about your success and your stories. Do you have a great curriculum? Do you have a great program that you want to talk about? Arts integration. How are you working to provide children with a well-rounded education? Share those stories with your members and their staff. It's important, as we say, to underscore your success, especially in the current climate. So tips and reminders, again, offer to answer any questions related to principals in schools, especially obviously your local issues and what you're facing. Sometimes staff may ask you a legislative question that you simply just don't know the answer to. Please refer them to us. We will follow up. And even in your school or in your area, if you've encountered a specific legislative issue that we haven't talked about today and would like more information about it because you want to bring it up in your meeting, let us know. We're happy to research an issue and share with you anything we may know about the issue because, believe it or not, there's a lot more we haven't covered. So, as always, it's great to invite staff and members to come to your school and visit during district work periods, especially this year being an election year. They love to go around and visit with their constituencies. So it's an opportunity for you to grab their ear, bring them to your school, show them what's going on, have them come and eat lunch in your school with the kids. It's a great opportunity to give them firsthand knowledge. And then, of course, always remember to follow up, and this is to say, please grab a business card or a contact information with the staffers, of the staffers with whom you meet, and we'll help you there during our follow-up as well. So next slide. And I think we've kind of already said this, but we'll provide follow-up assistance if needed. We have additional materials related to policy and legislative work that we're happy to provide. Wear comfortable shoes. It's hot right now in D.C. in case you've seen the weather reports on the Mid-Atlantic East Coast area. The heat wave has subsided a bit, but we continue it to be expected to continue to be a typical July in Washington. And be prepared to give yourself enough time when you go up on Capitol Hill. Again, we've asked you to schedule meetings. I believe our breakfast ends at 9 o'clock, so it's reasonable to try and schedule a meeting anywhere from 9:30 to 4:30. We have a debriefing after you'll be spending your day on Capitol Hill to go over everything that you learned, what you saw, and what you encountered. And the agenda for NLC, again, can be found on the NLC website. Here is our contact information. Please feel free to email Emily or I directly if you have any questions. Honor, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we do. We have a few more here. How does sequestration square with a potential increase in Title I and IDEA?
I'll talk about that. like I said, it's unclear right now just if we will actually, at the end, see an increase in Title I and IDEA. I know it's a little confusing because we talk about the House and Senate both separately advocating for increases to those programs, but ultimately, if we end up in what's called a CR or a continuing resolution, we may just get a continuation of current funding levels. So, like I said, if we have on top of that the impact of sequestration, it's estimated that could be about 7 to 8% right now. But like I said, none of those figures are formalized. So at the end game, I would suspect that you would see pretty level funding to those programs. But with the threat of sequestration, there may be, in fact, a decrease.
So bottom line, we have a continuing resolution. No programs will get increases. They will be level funded. If Congress does not fix the sequester issue, then those programs will then get cut.
Okay, so do I understand the recommendation is to hold 10% of federal monies this coming year in anticipation of the January 2nd cut?
That's right. There are some states, as Emily pointed out, Texas and Vermont, who that have issued or asked their districts to prepare two different budgets, one with sequestered cuts set at 10% and one without.
But just to be clear, right now the estimations are that those cuts will be 7 to 9%. So it may not ever be as high as 10, but again, it's very unclear what ultimately may happen, and we're not done with this budget process to know exactly what those numbers will be.
Okay, folks should think about their local school budgets and figure a 10% cut, how that would impact their school building program, and you might want to talk
That's right.
That.
That's a great point. I can't see who said that, but that's an excellent point. When you talk about the impact of sequestration, talk about the programs and services that would have to be eliminated. Talk about the teachers' jobs that will go away, assistant principals. You know, there's any number of devastating effects of this. We encourage you to talk about those and share them with staff and members so that they understand and it can put a face to what may happen.
Here's another good point. There is currently a greater risk for principals in low-income schools, which may fall under the sanctions of NCLB. How can we encourage strong principals to seek positions in these schools when there may be in line for sanctions if and when their test scores are not high enough?
Well, this is an issue that the administration sought to address when they began the waiver process. And right now, I think that we're at 36 states who have either been approved or who have applied for waivers. And what we're seeing, how that's playing out, is in some cases we had states apply for waivers that didn't get approved fully. Just a reminder about the waiver process. The administration offered waivers in exchange for flexibility from the onerous and punitive provisions of No Child Left Behind, but states had to commit to implementing the administration's reform agenda. On that point, there are several states that just simply found it too costly, or they've been unable to meet all of those requirements, or in other words, strings attached. So what we've seen, two states in particular, who have not had their applications approved but have received waivers to have the AYP proficiency targets frozen, meaning their AMOs will be frozen from here on out. So that's an interesting development, and again, we're seeing this collision of different reforms and different iterations now of waivers.
A couple logistical things. Could you tell us a little bit about a little bit more about the debriefing that you're going to have for what's covered?
Sure. Well, we hope after you finish your visits on Capitol Hill, we'll be holding a debriefing session at the hotel, and we will be covering a couple of questions to get your feedback and input from what you heard and saw on Capitol Hill. The debriefing will be held from 4 to 5 o'clock. So I apologize, I think I misspoke on the time earlier. So schedule your meetings from about 9:30 to 3:30.
Great.
And then we'll have a brief presentation with you to go over our advocacy looking forward through the remainder of the year into the lame duck session.
Can you talk a little bit about the attire? Like, how should they dress? What's the
business attire? Again, it's hot out, so you know, in many cases, business casual, which means collared shirts for men, sport coats, comfortable shoes. And you know, for women, it's again business casual is usually accepted.
Will there be any team time to prepare as a skate group?
Yes, we will have plenty of team time for you. We've, in listening to you and your concerns that were raised last year for those returning, we've provided dedicated team time where you'll be working with your counterparts from AASA and others from your state and have some time during the briefing sessions on that Wednesday evening. We start the joint session at 3:30. We'll have an opening session and then a joint briefing to welcome you and get acclimated at 5 o'clock, and then we will go into your own state team time.
Wonderful. Well, that's it for our questions. I wanted to thank both of you for that. Are there any closing thoughts that you can give these people? Otherwise, we'll end the session.
Well, as we said earlier, we couldn't be more excited and eager to have you here in Washington. We're looking forward to seeing you. We want to hear from you between now and when you get to Washington, especially if you have outstanding questions, if there are areas that remain unclear to you about what we would like you to talk about, or logistics or any of the above. Please feel free to contact either Emily or I. We are happy to assist you in any way that we can. So looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much, and we are looking forward to having you.